Okay, so here we are with the third and final stage of respiration, oxidative phosphorylation. Oxidative phosphorylation is occurring within the mitochondria. This is where the bulk of the ATP is made. Remember, the mitochondria is the powerhouse, and it is the powerhouse because of oxidative phosphorylation. Oxidative phosphorylation, the whole process to making ATP, has two steps: the electron transport chain and chemiosmosis. So what is the difference? So the difference is the ETC, electron transport chain, uses the electrons from NADH and FADH to harvest, in a sense, their energy. It harvests or takes on the electrons from those two molecules. Please remember those two molecules came from or were made in the prior step, the citric acid cycle. So we have the electrons being taken, and also we have chemiosmosis. That's essentially where the ATP is made, and it's through a process of using hydrogen or a proton to fuel a protein to make ATP. So let's break it down just a little bit. The ETC is occurring in the mitochondria, and the two processes together produce 26 to 28 ATP. Again, chemiosmosis uses hydrogen ions, sometimes referred to as a proton. Please keep that in mind. It is going to be moved across the concentration gradient, and ATP will be made. Okay, so what is this electron transport chain? What is it made of? So it's made of a series or a collection of molecules. Please keep in mind we're still in the mitochondria and we're within the membrane itself. So we're within the folds, we're within the cristae of the mitochondria. So it is a series of proteins and also non-protein components like iron working hand in hand to receive these electrons which came from NADH and FADH. These electrons are going to be bouncing around. They're going to be reducing some parts and oxidizing other parts. So when something is being oxidized, it's going to be losing those electrons. Oil rig. When something else is receiving or gaining the electrons, it's going to be considered as being reduced. So the electrons are bouncing around between these metals, between these protons, and hydrogen will be released. Hydrogen from the NADH and the FADH. So again, to summarize the ETC, electrons are bouncing around. Hydrogen is being taken from those energy molecules, making a gradient within the mitochondria, a hydrogen gradient, a hydrogen concentration, and from this process, water will be made. So hydrogens, again, from those energy molecules with oxygen will make water. So water is a product of the electron transport chain. Here is a closer look at the electron transport chain. You can see the blobs. The blobs are the proteins. Now this is a really deceiving picture because when I glance at it myself, because I see that phospholipid bilayer, I mistakenly assume it's the plasma membrane. It is not. This is not. This is the folds of the mitochondrial matrix, which is also composed of a phospholipid bilayer. So that's what we're looking at. So now you can see at the bottom of the screen the NADH, the FADH, hydrogen is being stripped from the NADH, so it is being oxidized, and it's going into the inner membrane space. Now the arrows, the yellow arrows inside would indicate the electrons bouncing around between the different types of proteins, and on the right, water is made. The next part of oxidative phosphorylation is called chemiosmosis. So chemiosmosis utilizes those free hydrogens that were released by NADH and FADH. And it also incorporates a protein or has a protein in it. The protein is called ATP synthase. And this is a protein that in fact makes the ATP. Now, how does this all come together? So we have in that inner membrane space all of these hydrogens. So those hydrogens make an acidic environment, which isn't necessarily good for the mitochondria or the cell. So it's slightly acidic. The hydrogen attaches to that protein. The protein to me looks like a turbine. So as soon as the hydrogens attach to it, the turbine or the protein is able to turn. When it moves, ADP is able to be phosphorylated, meaning ADP is able to pick up that extra phosphate and turn into ATP. Now the movement of that protein is called a proton motive force. So to summarize, energy is needed from that hydrogen, slightly acidic environment to move in or across, turning the turbine, turning ATP synthase, and ATP is made.